The biggest mistake you can make watching Crazy Old Lady is thinking you're watching a movie about a woman who forgot who she was. It's the opposite. Alicia hasn't lost her mind. She's finally found the room where she kept the bodies, and she's inviting Pedro in to help her redecorate. Alicia's dementia isn't a tragic decay of the self. It's a structural collapse of the mask she wore during the Dirty War. Pedro isn't a victim of a crazy old lady. He is a proxy in a ritualistic reenactment of a state-sponsored trauma that never truly ended. Caesar isn't a hallucination, he's the lingering shadow of Argentina's disappearing era. And by the time the credits roll, Pedro has been initiated in a cycle of violence that Alicia has been perfecting for 40 years. If you haven't seen the film, leave now. I'm about to spoil this movie harder than Alicia spoiled that dessert. You've been warned. The film starts with the classic good guy setup. Pedro, fueled by the kind of ex-boyfriend guilt that usually leads to a bad late-night text, agrees to check on Emma's mother. But look at the house. It's not just cluttered, it's a curated museum of repression. And note the color palette. The director drenches the suburbs of Buenos Aires in a jaundiced, sickly yellow. This isn't vintage chic, it's the color of bile and old secrets. When Pedro first arrives, the heavy rain isn't just atmospheric, it's a physical barrier, sealing the vessel of the house. Pedro runs over the dog immediately. This is our first major setup and payoff moment. A naked plot viewer sees this as Pedro just being clumsy or careless. The analyst sees it as the loss of Pedro's moral high ground. By hiding that body under the tree, Pedro enters into a silent pact of deceit with the house. He thinks he's protecting a frail woman. In reality, he's just proven to the house that he's capable of the same disappearing tactics Alicia used decades ago. When Alicia first calls Pedro Caesar, it's easy to dismiss it as a glitch in her synapses, but watch her eyes. She's testing him. The Caesar identity is a functional role. She needs a partner for her games, and Pedro's empathy is the ultimate vulnerability. When she insists they eat the burned dessert, she's not being a bad cook, she's asserting dominance. She's measuring his willingness to comply with an obvious lie. And the blue pill he finds in the napkin later isn't just a sign of medical noncompliance. It's a declaration of war. By rejecting the medication, Alicia is choosing the 1970s over the present. She is choosing the Dirty War version of herself, the one who knew how to dispose of neighbors and silence cries. This is the lore master pay dirt. Alicia shows Pedro her missing pinky and ring toe. She frames it as violent games they used to play. This is a massive flashing neon light pointing to a history of domestic sadomasochism that was likely mirrored by the political violence of that era. The house isn't just a home, it was a black site. The neighbor, Graciela, and her 5-year-old son didn't just disappear. They were the first victims of a domestic cult of two. When Alicia describes Caesar suffocating the child because he didn't want to stay, she's describing the ultimate loss of control. The trauma that broke Alicia wasn't the murder, it was the fact that Caesar left her afterward. To Alicia, murder is a bond. Abandonment is the only true sin. The climax of Crazy Old Lady isn't just a physical brawl, it's a collapse of timelines. When Pedro falls through the floorboards into the basement, he's not just falling into a literal pit, he's falling into the truth Alicia spent 40 years bearing. This is where the cynic in me has to point out the classic horror trope of the secret room. But here it serves a narrative purpose. Pedro finds the portrait of the real Caesar. This is the smoking gun. Caesar isn't a ghost, he was a man, and more importantly, he was a documentarian of his own cruelty. The sketches of a chained woman, likely Alicia herself or previous Gracielas, confirmed that Alicia wasn't just a perpetrator, she was the survivor of a monster who molded her into his image. When Laura breaks in, Alicia's brain completely short circuits. She doesn't see her daughter, she sees Graciela, the neighbor she helped murder. This is the ultimate no naked plot moment. Alicia stabbing Laura isn't just a crazy person doing crazy things. It's Alicia attempting to finish the job she started decades ago. She's trying to kill the guilt of the past by killing the person who represents her future. The most chilling part of the ending, Alicia's sudden lucidity. When Laura calls her mother repeatedly, the fog clears just enough for Alicia to realize she's losing the game. She doesn't stay to face the music, she steals the car. This isn't the act of a woman with advanced dementia. It's the act of a calculated criminal who knows how to evade capture. But look at the tragic irony of Pedro's good guy persona. Even after being tortured, he manages to get the upper hand, ready to end the threat. But Laura, driven by a biological loyalty to a woman who has just stabbed her, begs him for mercy. It's the split-second hesitation, that civilized distraction that seals his fate. Alicia doesn't hesitate. She seizes the opening and drives a fire poker into Pedro's groin before braining him with a sickeningly industrial thud. It's the final obliteration boundary. The caretaker has become the butcher, and the hero is left as nothing more than a biological waste in a house built on disappearances. And here's a theory that might keep you up at night. The cycle isn't over, it's just found a new host. Think about Elena's nightmares. She describes César perfectly. The mustache, the nose, the phrase, "bite me." How does a child who has never met this man know these details? It's not just scary stories from her grandmother. The film suggests a psychic or behavioral contagion. There's a popular theory floating around that Alicia didn't just leave Elena in the car at the end. She passed something to her. Notice Elena's reaction to the chaos. She doesn't scream, she doesn't run. She tries to go back to sleep while the world honks around her. She is already compartmentalizing trauma, just like Alicia did. And there's a rumor that an alternate ending exists where Pedro survives but is found in the basement polishing the portrait of César. It implies that the house and the role of the man of the house is a curse that consumes anyone who stays too long. By the time Pedro is impaled and left to bleed, he has effectively become the disappeared victim he was always destined to be in Alicia's world. Was the ending earned? Honestly, I'm leaning toward no. While the film tries to anchor its shock value in the heavy history of Argentina's Dirty War, the connection feels more like a convenient aesthetic than a fully realized thematic payoff. By the time we get to the fire poker incident, the movie crosses the line from a tense psychological thriller into a mean-spirited slog that punishes the audience for ever liking its protagonist. The Dirty War references, the disappearances, the state-sponsored cruelty, should have made Alicia a more complex avatar of national guilt. Instead, the film uses that history as a justification to turn her into a standard invincible slasher villain. It feels cheap to watch Pedro, a man whose only crime was having a shred of human decency, get brutally brained just to prove a point about how evil never dies. The payoff isn't satisfying, it's hollow. It ignores the hero's journey not to subvert expectations, but to wallow in a cynical gotcha moment that doesn't feel like it was earned by the character's choices. If the movie wanted to be a scathing critique of national amnesia, it needed to do more than just mention a portrait in a basement before turning into a torture porn flick. In the end, it feels like the director had a great historical hook, but didn't know how to land the plane without crashing it into a pile of misery for misery's sake. Is this a bold subversion of the genre, or just a movie that hates its own audience? I'm betting on the latter. If you think I'm being a little too hard on Alicia, or you think Pedro deserved a better fate, let's go at it in the comments. Check out what I thought of the movie up above my head, and there's another video by my head that YouTube thinks you'll like. And I'll see you next time.